Hi, I'm Ron Nutter, and welcome to another edition of Tech Bites with Ron Nutter. This time, we're going to be talking about how to set up your Raspberry Pi 4 with something called Docker for your smart home. And this is part 3 in the Raspberry Pi series. If you don't know what Docker is, hang on, we'll be there in just a moment. This video is also available as an Amazon flash briefing or podcast. For more information, please go to techbiteswithronnutter.com and we'll get you started. For any items mentioned in this video, there are affiliate links in the description. If you click on these links, I will get a small commission, but that won't affect the price you pay for the item. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click on subscribe and enable notifications. If this video helps you, then click on the like button, thumbs up. Now, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to first talk a little bit about what Docker is, and I'll relate to some of the other videos I've already done on the channel. Then we'll go about setting up Raspbian Buster Lite, which is just the kind of the command line only version, because once we get a few things done, you're not going to need to touch the Raspberry Pi directly as far as getting a command line session. I'm going to try to do it all from GUI. That way it makes it easier on all concerned. Now we're going to need to enable something called SSH, and we'll show that here in just a bit. And we'll boot the Raspberry Pi up from the newly created card. We'll install Docker. We'll install something called Portainer, which is going to help you manage the Raspberry Pi setup. And all this is going to be on our little buddy here, the Raspberry Pi 4 that I got from the LABISTS folks. Now, we'll go in about accessing the Portainer web interface, and then we may even go around to showing you how to set up Pi-hole on this. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, now as promised, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm already at the raspberrypi.org/downloads/Raspbian, and we're going to get the Raspbian Buster Lite distribution. You see, this one's been out for just a few weeks, but so far it's been working fine for me. I download the zip file. Now, something else you'll want to use, now granted, I'm doing this on a Mac, but you can do this on a PC as well, is get a hold of something called Balena Etcher. It's a free package out there, and it will make the process of taking the binary that you've downloaded, even though it's in zip form, and you'll see the magic here in just a second. It will send it to the micro SD card, or in this case SD card that's in a shuttle, and we'll go ahead and plug the card in. It should see something here in just a second, and you can see it's already seen it. So, and then you'll be ready to take that out, plug it into the Raspberry Pi, and as the British folks would say, Bob's your uncle. So we'll select the image, and just to save time, I've already downloaded it. So here's the Buster Lite binary we got, and even though it's in zip file, don't worry about that, because here's the beauty of Balena Etcher. See, it already sees the image file inside of it, so we're set to go there, and we've already selected the SD card, so you can see it already picked it up and takes care of all the background stuff, knowing what how to get to it. So we'll click on continue and then click flash, and now with it being on a Mac, I've got an additional security step where I have to give it the my password. But if you've never done this before, and I'm assuming by going through some of these steps you may not have, you can't make this any easier. So it's really very straightforward. It's going to take the image file, basically unpack it, put it out onto the SD card, and then most importantly, it's going to verify it. So if you've got a bad zip file and don't know it, it's going to tell you. If you've got any problems with it, it should flag that there's a problem. And if you say, for heaven forbid, your SD card is part of the problem, it should tell you. So of all the different packages I've used over the years, this one really has been consistently works every time so far. And once it goes through writing to the micro SD card that's in the little adapter shell, then it will start verifying. Oh, and here's a trick. If you ever have one where you plug the micro SD card into the shell and it doesn't see it, obviously first thing is just try taking it out and then back in. If that doesn't work, then try another adapter shell, because one time I had problems where the adapter shell simply was having problems connecting onto the pins or the fingers of the micro SD card. So that's a way to do it right there. And just you see, just about done here. It's going to unmount it, and we're done. So you can't make it any simpler than that. So let's go ahead and move it over to our Raspberry Pi. Well, now that we've got the Raspbian Buster distribution already burned on the SD card, let's go ahead and move it over to the Raspberry Pi, and we can get that sucker boot it up and get Docker installed. Oh, before I get started, I've jumped ahead on the game a little bit. If you're wanting to know what Docker is, let me pull up a graphic over here, and that's going to make it a lot easier to understand, because you've seen me do some of the other videos about doing virtualization, and this is handy. This is a different way of doing it that will, I think, make it a lot easier to work with for you, because there's times, and as I'm talking here, I'm actually getting the link copied over. There we go. Now, this is going to be an easy way to explain it. Now, you saw me do some other videos several months back on something called VirtualBox. Well, as we look on the right hand side of the screen, that's what we were doing. VirtualBox is the hypervisor. So where it says infrastructure, interpret that to mean Windows 10 or Mac or Linux, whatever you're using as the base operating system on your computer. Well, the hypervisor allows you, in this case, we're going to start working with Docker, but the same thing conceptually is there with the Docker setup as well. You're going to have the hardware and then an operating system. You got to have that in place. But with VirtualBox and the other type of desktop virtualizations or server virtualizations, you're going to have to install another operating system within a virtual machine, and then the actual app you want to use. So now you've got the base operating system or your host OS that's going to have to be continually patched and upgraded. And then you've got your guest operating systems and all the VMs. They're going to have to be patched and updated. So it can become a very administrative heavy thing, to where if you're depending on how many virtual machines you're running, especially in a home environment, you don't want to have to keep worrying about patching this and patching this and patching this. Let's just kind of let it take care of itself. And see, that's where with Docker, you have one operating system, which in our case is going to be the Raspbian OS that we're going to use. Then Docker is installed on top of that, and then we'll have individual apps or containers that we'll have running. And there's a whole host of them. Some other videos I've done in the past on Pi-hole. Pi-hole, we're going to show how to get this set up and running. Today is we're just kind of getting you exposed to Docker, and we'll get Docker installed, and then we're going to have a graphical interface to work with it, so that I'm trying not for you to have to be in command line anymore as necessary. And if you choose to be, that's fine. That's your choice. But I want to show you some options that I can make it as web browser friendly as I can, so that you have time to get in and do the command line piece. And you will at some point, because there's some things you'll get to see and log files you can look at that are a little easier to deal with from that perspective. So I tell you what, let's shift over here to the Raspberry Pi, and we'll get the Raspbian Buster release in here. And just like before, with the way this is mounted in the LABISTS case, the little fingers for the card will go up, and you'll see that it should match right into the contacts on there. And there's no real spring mechanism. You just put it in to make sure it's securely in place, and then we will get it turned on. And we'll shift over here, and it's going to be a blank screen for just a second, but as you see, it's starting to come up. It did basically a very brief power on self-test, and it's resizing the card because the distribution as it comes out is set for apparently a much smaller card, which is fine. I just got a bunch of 32 gig cards around Christmas that were, well, let's say the price was right. So let's go ahead, and it's going through all its process here. And let me shift over here, and I'm going to turn off the lower third at this point, because that's kind of blocking some things. It's actually, well, okay. Well, I guess I won't turn it off. It's going to be easier to deal with here. So it's, I think, just about ready. So we're going to shift now over to my Chromebook. You can see the full screen. So now that we've got the RPi, or Raspberry Pi, sorry, we'll talk in abbreviations, that we've got it set to go. So we're going to first take this line, And we will copy and then move over here to the terminal and we'll paste that in. And it should have already gotten the script. I was hoping for a little bit of feedback. So now we will go through here and copy that. And it's running through its paces, so we'll should have some idea of, okay, so it's doing some updates. It's just, and with it redirecting it to null, it's gonna not be as chatty as we might like, but at least it's going to get it installed. And it's moving right along, so it can't really complain, but at least it is running through the paces to where you don't have to, if you're not fluent with Linux, that you don't have to be as deep under the hood. But that's why I want to do as much of this for you to see it in real time as I'm doing it, to make it a little bit easier for you to go through. And there's obviously the things that we may talk about at some point about changing the host name, and certainly want to change the password of the Pi user and probably create a separate account with similar authority or access so that you can use the Pi account just as a last ditch process. Okay, so that's good, and it's already telling us here the next step. See, what I was going to have to do here next is put in the mod here, that put in usermod, so we would have that on here. So we'll actually just, since it senses I'm using the Pi name, that is fine, and we'll just paste. Okay, now user Pi can do, we've added the user Pi into the Docker group, so we don't have to, you know, if you set up a non-root user, which Pi is root, but anyway, I did it just for general principles. So now we will make the directory for Portainer, which Portainer is going to be the piece that's going to make it give you a graphical web interface to use. And let's do that. Well, come on. It's the only challenge I've had with a Chromebook is occasionally the touchpad can be a little sensitive, and I've done everything I can, but that's life. Okay, so now we'll pull it. Okay, we're getting denied here. All right. Okay, I've had to switch back over to my main MacBook because the SSH client I was using on the Chromebook was not playing nice on a few things. So let's go back here and we will pull. Okay, now let's go ahead and get Portainer installed. Okay, so as it says, it's got it down there, and then we will go through and tell Docker that it's supposed to run it and which port to use. And we'll paste, and okay, that appears like it may. Let's see, Docker container ls. Ah, okay, that says it's up and running. Okay, I knew that some of it I've played with a little Linux a little bit before, so that told me, okay, so that's a good sign. That's what we want to see. And what I did in the process was make sure I logged out and logged back in so the group membership change took effect. So now 10.0.1.162, that's what happens when I translated an address around. And guess what? It works. Okay, so to make it simple at this point, we will make it the same password as the default Raspberry Pi. I know, not a good idea, but this is just to get us up and running. Bingo. So that's it. I mean, this is, now we've got a menuized way of getting in. All right, and we'll now move over to the installation of Pi-hole. Now, you're going to see me switch screens and be looking one way because my notes are on one screen because I'm trying to keep the Chromebook limited to just accessing Portainer. So, like I said, you know, here's our faithful LABISTS package Raspberry Pi. And right now I have it on a wired connection, but eventually I probably will move it to wired. So let's get back over here, and I've got the screen ready to go. So now we'll shift here, and then you see what I'm looking at. Now, there are, as with anything, there is more than one way to do this. So I'm going to try to do as many of these setups for Docker from within the Portainer GUI, because it's, especially when you start having to manipulate ports, you can see kind of more what's going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started here. We will go down to container, and then we will click on add a container. And right now you see Portainer is just the container is just running Portainer, so we'll do Pi-hole. If I could spell, you know, that would be nice. Okay, and we'll do, and the image here will be Pi-hole, Pi-hole. And we always pull the image. Now, this is where you've got to be very careful, and I'm going to show you. There'll be a link in the notes for how I did this, and I'm giving full credit to the site that I got this from, because once you followed it literally, I made a deviation, and guess what, folks? It did not work. So we're going to follow the book according to the website homenetworkguy.com, because it simply works, and I'm trying to do as much as I can within Portainer, although some of the videos that I'm going to produce will have to be done command line because I've not been able to figure out a way to get it to work in Portainer. But, you know, it's one step at a time. So let's go over here, and we're now going to publish the ports. Now, you see this option here, publish all exposed network ports to random host ports. Do not, I repeat, do not turn that on. So we'll publish a network port, and the host port is going to be 443. Container is going to be 443. And that's going to be TCP. We want to leave it that way. Then we'll click on Publish a New Port again. And this time we're going to go 53, 53, and that's going to be also TCP. Now, you'll see two different entries in here for port 53. And you do need both of them, and here's why. If you're doing just a simple A record lookup, or you're trying to translate, say, www.novell.com, you are doing just a single record lookup, so that's going to use UDP. If you're doing a full domain lookup like novell.com, then you are going to be using TCP, because there's information that it needs to make sure is going to transfer. So that's why you have to do both. Most of the time, this is something you're never going to have to worry about. So we've got 53 TCP, so we'll do 53 and 53, and we will click UDP. And then we go down here to port 80. Now, also, just to note here, when you are doing multiple containers on a single Docker instance, you've got to make sure you don't have overlapping ports, or things are going to start going a little squirrely. So that's where you may have to have, say, port 81 on the outside of things, and then have it to port 80 on the inside. But that's a subject we're probably never going to have to get near. All right, so we've got all our ports taken care of. So now what we'll do is we'll go down here into advanced. We'll go down here to volumes, and we're going to have to map some things so that Pi-hole will work right. So we'll map an additional volume, and the first one is going to be etc DNS mask.d, and that's going to be a bind, and that refers to we're doing a specific mapping on things. So in this point, it's going to be home pi-hole, and I'm trying to read my, no, okay, so that's, no, pi-hole, okay, then DNS mask d dot d. Okay, so that one's done. So now we'll map another container volume, and this is going to be etc pi-hole, and this is also going to be a bind, and then we will do /home pi-hole. Makes me think of the old Disney song, hi ho off the road deck, or, well, you know the rest of the song. I don't want to get in copyright violation here. Okay, so just to double check the settings here, we've got etc DNS mask.d, home pi-hole DNS mask.d. For the second one, etc pi-hole, home /pi-hole/pi-hole. Okay, we're good to go. So now we have to make some setting changes here. And what we want to do is go over to network, and bridge basically is where Docker is acting like kind of a simple firewall. So we're going to leave the network name alone. Host name is going to be, well, we're really not even going to mess with that one. IPv4 address we're going to leave alone. The first one we're going to make 127.0.0.1. Let's double check something else here. Okay, and then I'm going to make secondary DNS 8.8.8.8. You can pretty much use whatever you want to. So now there's some environment variables we're going to have to set. So now we'll click on env, and we will add an environment variable, and these are all important things that need to be added. So we'll do TZ, not Texas, TZ, which is time zone, and then America, and for me it's going to be Chicago, if I can spell Chicago, and then it's going to be DNS1 and 8.8.8.8, and DNS2, just so that we always have a fallback. I will do 8.8.4.4, and add another environment variable. And this one is important to add because this is going to be the password for Pi-hole. Is if you don't specify here, it's going to do something random, and then you got even more sorts of fun. So I'm going to make it just at this point the same password as that. Not a good idea in production purposes, but this is going to try to keep things as simple as it can. Now, restart policy, we want it to unless stop. So that way, if you do have to do a restart, or when you see here in the later video when we talk about something that's going to automatically update your containers for you, so that you don't have to worry about going through and having that to have to remember to do, this is where it's going to be very important. So if you manually stop it because you're making a change to a config file, or you're delving in something in that area, this way it's going to make it a little more predictable on handling. Now, we've got everything ready. So we will click on deploy the container. It's going to go through and download the actual container from Docker's website. And this is the part that takes forever. No, I just didn't give it long enough. Here we go. I just didn't give it long enough to do its job, because I was thinking I was literally on the console and I was through a web GUI. So now that we've switched over, that you see it says starting. So they're going to have to give it a second to come up and running, and see you've got all your ports published here, which is a good thing, We've got to let it fully come up. Now it's okay. It still says starting, so that's good. It's going to take it just a second, because think of it just like a regular computer. It's got to have a startup sequence, and you can always tell you have a configuration problem if you see your published ports disappear, because that's generally indicating that, as they say, all is not well. Now it says healthy. Okay, it would have eventually refreshed. So now, as they say, the rubber is going to hit the road, and HTTP 10.0.1.146, and we're going to call admin, and ta-da! Got Pi-hole up and running. Now, you've seen my other Pi-hole videos, so I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here at this point and redo that. But you can see what is involved, and really, this is a very elegant way to have Pi-hole running and not have to dedicate a Raspberry Pi to it. Not that, you know, $40 is a big deal, but I've already been playing with some other options, and this is where, now right now you see just the two containers, and I'm going to show you a command line option in a future video where you can actually see the usage of the Raspberry Pi, all the different containers within Docker, and you can see to a degree how much you can stack on a particular Raspberry Pi. And I'm already working on a whole other video that's going to have it to give you some tips and tricks about working with Docker, looking at how to back up an individual container, how to back up your entire SD card, just so that for those of you who haven't done this, that you've got kind of a starting point to go from. So again, you see what's going on here. We've got Pi-hole up and running, and the console came up, and trust me, the first few times I did this, it was not that pretty. And I just, because I was not following the instructions. So we've got things up and running. You've got your first instance of putting something up on Docker, and you know, start having fun. So you're going to see videos on to my right or left that are the next steps to the one that you've already been watching right now. Now those in this case will be the other Raspberry Pi Pi-hole videos, just to help link everything together for you. Now, if this video helps you or provides value, please click on the like button, thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click on subscribe and enable notifications, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.